all of a sudden it's all about Lance again. And for whatever reason, this Lombardo rumor got me to look up a podcast with Rich Gangarello from March. It's old. I should have seen this already, but I never heard it. And I went back and listened to it. You went back and listened to it. It's fascinating. So I'd love to hear your takeaway from the 20 minutes of the Niners' former quarterback coach explaining what he looks for when he scouts the most important position.
First of all, I thought the podcast was fantastic. I thought those 20 minutes were amazing. Just
Learned a lot.
Insight. Like you get a lot of insight because Coach Sal's obviously fantastic and he knows a lot. And then Scangarillo, no matter what you want to say, he's been in the NFL for a bunch of years. He's been around a lot of quarterbacks. He's coached quarterbacks for a while. And I thought the insight was something that, we don't usually get because usually it's, oh, how do his teammates react to him? Oh, you just want a guy that's good. You just want that. Those are the kind of generic answers we get. I thought there was a little more depth to the conversation about quarterbacks, which, for somebody like me who geeks out about that stuff, I found it really, really entertaining. And then I thought the point that he made actually about how quarterbacks handle, tight spaces and contested pockets was arguably the most interesting thing because I've heard Shanahan talk about that a lot when it comes to quarterback play. Because the entire NFL game, right, is that the protection is not good. And you want to have a quarterback.
Especially on Kyle Shanahan's team. I'm sorry. Keep going.
Well, okay. And you want to have a quarterback, that can, stand in and handle bad protection and be able to manage it and stuff. If you want to hear Kyle Shanahan raving about this, listen to the way he talked about Matthew Stafford on the Flying Coach. What makes Matthew Stafford so special, at least in my opinion, I don't know about so special, but what makes him a really, really good quarterback for this many years is that he's able to handle bad protection and manage it because he's really, really good at throwing with bodies around him.
Yep. Had a lot of practice in Detroit.
Yeah, I don't know if that's
Scangarillo also said, like, he pointed to Dwayne Haskins. He's like, he failed. This was before Dwayne Haskins passed away. He failed because he was a mirage because at Ohio State they really protect their quarterbacks. I mean, he never got hit at Ohio State.
Right, exactly. And he's pointed about a Trevor Lawrence.
Exactly.
I think there's other examples like Jared Goff. To me, is a guy that has never learned to be able to play with bodies around him, and that's the NFL. He's never been able to function. Garoppolo, right, showed it in 2017 that he could manage, and he still can throw with people around him, but now we see him panic, which is a totally different issue. I think that was a really, really interesting conversation from that standpoint, right? Because I do think that is the NFL. If you look at the best quarterbacks, whether it's Deshaun Watson, Joe Burrow, Stafford, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, they all have an ability to function in tight pockets and tight spaces with people around them. They can throw, they can make good decisions, they can escape, they can make off-schedule explosive plays, They can do so many different things. And that's really what separates good quarterbacks and like bad ones, right? Like Baker Mayfield. What's been the theme in Baker Mayfield's career? When he has good protection, he's a pretty good quarterback. When he doesn't, he sucks. I mean, you go back to Oklahoma, right? He was afforded the best protection. He played in the Pac-12, worst defenses in college football.
Big 12.
Big 12, excuse me.
Yeah.
Pac-12 is
sorry,
my bad. Big 12, good catch. And in the Big 12, worse. I mean, Pac-12 doesn't have great defenses, but it's better than the Big 12.
That's true.
But the Big 12 defenses are terrible. Oklahoma has
the only good defense in the Big 12 is Oklahoma.
Yeah, and they haven't. Well, I don't even know about that.
Exactly, right?
Defense too.
Yeah,
and so they had elite protection, right? They had Zeus Brown when he was there, and they had a few other guys who were drafted. And he played really well when he was in Cleveland. 1 year he had great success, which was a year ago when they made the playoffs and they won a playoff game. So 2 years ago, technically, now that we finished this season, they had the best offensive line in the NFL with Wyatt Teller and Joe Bitonio and Treader and Wills and all these guys getting, and then you see him struggle this year when he didn't have good protection, or in 2019 when he had terrible protection. They were a bad football team. So like, it is a great point. I don't know if it's the most translatable thing, right? Because I mean, Josh Rosen's another example of this. Couldn't operate under pressure and really, really struggled. So I do think that that's like a great point. I don't know if it's the end all be all. He made it sound like it's an absolute. I don't know if it's an absolute.
But what he talks about is like, he basically said, if you could only look at one, he basically said, if you could just show me all a quarterback's clips when he's under pressure in college, if that's all I'd look at, that's the defining trait. He didn't talk about any other physical traits other than that. And that's where I feel like I think you're putting too much emphasis on one thing.
Right. Because I think also how a quarterback handles the tight spaces is also an important part of the discussion, right? Because he made it sound like it's just a mental trait. Either you can handle it or you can't. But like Joe Burrow handles it totally different from how Russell Wilson handles it.
Thank you.
The
Thank
common
you.
theme is that they're both really, really good quarterbacks
And
because they're
Tom
able to
Brady handles it
handle.
different from how Steve Young handled
Exactly.
it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I wish, and that was my one gripe. I wish he would get into what he thinks a quarterback needs to be able to handle it. Because
Yeah.
before it used to be the quarterback just needs to be able to play in rhythm, on time, on schedule, the way like a Matt Ryan plays with pure anticipation, just stand in and be able to just move in the pocket and be so functional from that standpoint. But guys like Watson, especially if you look at Watson's first year behind that, I mean, pardon my French, that shitty offensive line, he was able to handle himself. And it wasn't all playing on time, on schedule with, great sense of timing and all that. He did that 2 years ago, his last season he played. That was when it was all of that. But his first year was more just he had this special athleticism and special feel in tight spaces to make people miss and then know where people are. It was an awareness thing more so than it was, oh, he is perfect within the offense. And I wish you could get into that a little bit more. And then you'd want to talk about like the quarterbacks we mentioned. The other thing is they're all special throwers. Like they all have incredibly strong arms, incredible ability to contort their bodies in different positions and throw, ability to throw without setting their feet and stuff. So like there's other physical traits, right, that give them the ability to be able to function in the contested pocket. So that was the one thing I would say that stood out to me. Like he made it sound like it was an absolute, but I feel like there was more nuance to that.
It was really great to hear him just lay it out over 20 minutes, though, because I feel like it's pretty much how Kyle Shanahan has looked at quarterbacks for a long time,
Oh
too.
yeah.
And it explains why the Niners have had the quarterbacks they've had and why they've passed on the ones that they've passed on. I mean, Trey Lance is a whole departure from what they've been doing. But let's put him aside. Like it explains CJ Beathard. CJ
Does
Beathard,
it?
he won 12 games at Iowa. They never win 12 games. He was a multi-year starter. He's tough. I mean, in that sense, he elevated the program. I think it does explain. It explains Nick Mullins. I mean, Southern Miss was
Yes.
awful. They were like 0-12
Yes.
before he got there. He had a 9-win season. It
Well,
explains Brock Purdy. Iowa State is
Scangarillo's
terrible.
baby was Nick Mullins, right? That was
It explains Nate
Scangarillo's
Sudfeld.
guy.
It explains Mullins. It explains Sudfeld. It explains Brock Purdy. I mean, these are all guys who had some team success in college, but really don't have a single physical trait you could point to. Nothing, not arm strength, not mobility. It
explains Kirk Cousins.
It explains Kirk Cousins. It explains Brian Greasy. I mean, that's a guy Mike Shanahan drafted. It explains Elvis Gerback going way, way back. That was someone the Niners got when Mike Shanahan was the offensive coordinator. I mean, these are guys that, multi-year starters, Big Ten. I'm just saying, at a certain point, you got to actually, that's important, but you need more than that, unless you're looking for backups.
Right. And we've seen that the program doesn't exactly mean the end all be all. I mean, to be fair, I do think there is an aspect of it, right? Like Joe Burrow, LSU was always really good. Joe Burrow took them to an unprecedented height. Deshaun Watson did that with Clemson. I mean, Clemson is the Clemson today because
I wanted
Deshaun
to talk
Watson.
about that. Let's go back to 2017. These Rich Scangarello and Kyle Shanahan passed on Watson and Mahomes. If you remember, Watson went 12th that year. And the narrative at the time was that he didn't elevate Clemson, was that Clemson was always good. And although he won a national title there, it was more Mike Williams went before him in that draft.
Yeah. And the other thing with Watson, if you remember, he used to just throw with an excessive amount of touch in Clemson. Yes. So there was questions about whether he could really rip it with RPMs and then week one in the NFL, like the first time you get to see Watson, turns out, oh, he can absolutely rip it when he needs to.
So Watson, I could see Kyle and Rich being like, and is it him or is it the
and he played in a college-y offense, right? He talked a lot about the offenses. Clemson's as college-y an offense as it gets.
And then Mahomes is playing in an air raid system, and he didn't even win in college. He won 7 games the first season, and he won 5 games the second season. So again, if this is your rubric and this is all you look at, Kyle and Rich, you might just miss on Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. They've said very interesting things, but they got to widen their lens.
The worst defense in the Big 12 in a conference full of bad defenses, Texas Tech's defense. You couldn't win a game with that defense. They were giving up 50.
I know.
They were giving up 50 a game. It's true. Yeah.
But if all you're looking at is Rich Scangarello's rubric for scouting quarterbacks, you might just miss on Patrick Mahomes. And the Niners, did.
Yeah, and
what's interesting is how much of a departure Trey Lance is from whatever Rich Gangarello was describing. I mean, there's certain things that maybe Rich would like about Trey, but there's certain things that he wouldn't, based on what he said. Not a multi-year starter.
right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And
So
that
is
was
that
the point, right?
overcorrection? Is that just an overcorrection, or
I
who
don't know
knows?
what it is,
Yeah,
but like that's what I was thinking, right? Because if he has these list of traits, maybe there's not a quarterback that fits all those traits. To me, the only quarterback that I thought of in the last 5 years, or like the last three, and when I've actually watched them and I've actually learned and I've actually sit down. By the way, by watching all these coaching clinics, charting, taking notes on all of this, Grant, I have maybe 5% more knowledge. Instead of knowing zilch, I know maybe 5%. I still have no clue what projects, what doesn't. This impossible. I feel like I wasted a lot of time. I've wasted a lot of time over the last 3 years, but that's okay. But the point is, Joe Burrow was the only one I felt like, okay, multi-year starter, showed the ability to function under pressure consistently, elevated a program totally. All of those things, I felt like he checked every single box he mentioned. Otherwise, maybe like I felt like Lance checked some of them, but then some of his comments made me like, oh, quarterback never functioned in a 2-minute drill. Lance never had a 2-minute drill
that's
in
what everyone
college.
said about him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Elevated
it
the
was clear.
program. North Dakota State's good no matter who their quarterback is.
Yeah. And it
Multi-year
was clear.
starter? No.
No, and it wasn't clear that he did not. I don't know if it was clear that he disliked Lance, but I think it was clear he disliked Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence.
Oh, he would flat out say Ohio State, Ohio State, Ohio. And it was
Yeah,
interesting that he was actually down on Trevor Lawrence. I get the feeling that the Niners had Zach Wilson rated ahead of Trevor Lawrence on
I
their
think so too.
thing.
I mean, Ben Albright said that a lot of teams might have had
Yeah.
Zach Wilson QB1, and he said the
Yeah.
Niners could be one of those teams.
Yeah.
I do
Anyway,
think so too.
all of a sudden, the Niners bet on a guy with traits. And basically what Scangarello was saying in his interview was, don't be seduced by traits. Traits will get you fired.
Right.
He just got fired. Well, the Niners are betting on traits, and I think it's really interesting because to me, that's the stuff you can't coach. Everything he's talking about is important, but really, it's like you get it with experience. No, like shouldn't the quarterback coach be able to work with someone like? Shouldn't the quarterback coach want someone like Lance, not someone like Elvis Gerback?
It's interesting. It's interesting because I do think where Lance kind of is a departure from this conversation is that he's not Malik Willis, where it's all projection and traits. The entire issue with Trey Lance was sample size, because what you actually saw in 2019 when he played was actually fairly refined. Like the issues that we talk about with Trey Lance after seeing him in the NFL were not the issues we talked about in college, right? He was not late throwing in the quick game. He was actually probably one of the best quick game quarterbacks in the draft. Justin Fields was the issue, was the quarterback who had issues with the quick game.
The system was totally projectable. I mean, he was under center.
It was projectable.
Yeah.
Right. And so he actually went and did play action. There were a lot of NFL things he did. He was just, I guess, the speed of the game, he just never really got a chance to adjust because he didn't really get to play last year. But I mean, the second half against Houston showed that he was getting more and more comfortable. We saw with each snap he took, he got more and more comfortable. Didn't we see
that with Carson Wentz? I mean, Wentz was older, but he went to the same school. His first year at Philly, he started, he played, he was okay. His second year,
he started off really hot the first 3 games, and then he kind of
played like a rookie.
Out. Yeah.
I mean, so I'm just saying. Yeah, I think speed of the game was an issue for Carson Wentz as well.
Yeah, of course. It's for every quarterback. Yes. Very few of them are like Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Deshaun Watson.
Right.
I don't think that's much of an issue.
Deshaun Watson looked like he was playing in slow motion the minute he stepped on that field. That was crazy.
Yeah, he was unreal. He's unreal.
Yes.
I think the conversation is just really, really interesting because I think people looked at it as when he said X, Y, and Z, he's talking about Trey Lance. I didn't look at it that way where if he said like, oh, you don't want a quarterback who can just throw 70 yards, blah, 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 blah. You want a quarterback who can process, be tough in the pocket. Trey Lance did show a lot of those things in college. Yeah. It was just like the sample size was so little. I think the biggest issue I honestly remember from Lance, just looking at my notes, was the accuracy of ball location, especially intermediate and down the field, was exceptionally inconsistent. And that was where Fields had the big advantage over him.
Right, that was all tracked. I mean, there were numbers, right? His completion percentage down the field was not as good.
Right, and that's where Fields throwing the ball down the field was exceptionally accurate. Like it was.
Now he also had 3 great receivers.
True, no doubt.
But so did Trey Lance. He had 1 great receiver.
Christian Watson was as good as any receiver I've seen in the FCS.
There you go.
So it's an interesting conversation, man. I don't think that I thought I'm glad you found that podcast.
Yeah.
I enjoyed listening to it. Rich Spangarillo is knowledgeable, clearly.
We learned from it. Thank you,
Yeah,
Rich.
I learned
My
a
main
lot.
takeaway from it was you are not the right coach for Trey, and I'm glad that you're not coaching him anymore. I'm not sure that Brian Greasy's the right coach for him either, though. Brian Greasy seems like I don't know. I don't know. He is totally in the
Well,
Kirk Cousins
Brian
model.
Greasy was I remember him being pretty tough on Lamar Jackson in a Monday night game.
I think we all remember that.